I started noticing them in the margins, not in history books, not in academic journals, but in ledgers. Old ledgers, the kind with that yellowed paper that makes everything feel both more deliberate and less transparent. Ledgers of children, extraordinarily many children, children who shouldn't exist according to the comfortable narrative we've inherited about population growth and social stability. And then they were gone. Not gradually, not through some documented decline in birth rates or slow demographic drift we can trace through census records. They simply stopped appearing. Somewhere around 1800, maybe 1850 at the latest, the archival record shifts. The children disappear. And the deeper I looked into this absence, the more it seemed to correspond with something else, something we've already explored in this series, the rapid disappearance of Tartarian society itself. The correlations seem too precise to be coincidental. Let me be clear about what I'm seeing. These aren't adoption stories. These aren't the occasional displaced families we still see today. Children orphaned by war or disease, documented and understood. These are individuals, frequently thousands of individuals in the same records, who appear to be unaccounted for, sometimes entire age groups. And they're listed not as anomalies, but as routine entries processed through systems that treated them as ordinary. They appear integrated into daily logistics in ways that suggest complete normality for their era. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. A manifest from New York, circa 1872. Hundreds of names listed beside destinations in the Midwest. The numbers are exact. I measured them against local census data from the towns that supposedly received them. The children arrive. 2/3 are never recorded again. This isn't a staged relocation celebrating charity. It's a transfer operation. Another document, this one from the American Interior dated 1886. A list of train arrivals, dozens of children per stop. Again, numbers, ages, assignments. The casual bureaucracy of people who are simply processing, not rescuing, not questioning. The ordinariness of these documents makes their content all the more extraordinary and disturbing to contemplate. And here's the strangest part. These records exist in relative abundance up until a certain point. Then they stop. Not slowly, not with declining frequency. They stop as if a switch was flipped, as if the children themselves were suddenly no longer there to register. This raises a simple but critical question. Where did they go? And that's where the orphan trains become impossible to ignore. We've documented the evidence in previous episodes. Millions of children moved across continents, identities stripped, names changed, origins erased. The global pattern of what appears to be a systematic redistribution sometime in the mid to late 1800s. The timing aligns almost perfectly with the disappearance of prior populations from the historical record. Not close, not approximately, almost perfectly. I found myself asking, what if the orphan trains weren't just a social program? What if they were a reset, a deliberate replacement of not just families and communities, but of entire populations that no longer fit the new order? What if the physical relocation of children coincided with the cultural burial of the old world? Look at what survives. We have shells of cities, repurposed, renamed. their original identities obscured or forgotten. We have neighborhoods whose origins make no demographic sense. We have institutions filled with children who no longer remember where they came from. What we don't have are the records of who they were before. The originals are gone. And with them went the continuity of memory. In the previous investigation, we explored the possibility that Tartarian populations were removed rather than defeated. The sudden absence of adults, the surplus of children, the rise of orphanages everywhere. All of this suggested a society that lost its elders overnight. The physical evidence points repeatedly toward a generation that vanished, leaving behind dependents who could be reshaped. But reshaped into what? And by whom? Consider the systems again. Not just the trains, but the paperwork. The legal frameworks that allowed mass transfer without consent. These programs weren't improvised. They were sophisticated in ways that exceeded the supposed administrative capacity of their era. National coordination, standardized procedures, long-distance logistics, executed with precision that modern governments struggle to match. The organizational sophistication seems deliberately designed for a transition on a massive scale. What if these children weren't just relocated, but reassigned? What if they weren't being rescued, but repurposed into a new population? The official explanation collapses here because if millions of children were moved, renamed, and absorbed, then their sudden disappearance from original communities presents a crisis for conventional historical narratives. You can't simply remove an entire generation without explanation, without trauma records, without resistance, without any of the mechanisms by which societies respond to loss. Unless, of course, the operation was framed as benevolence. Unless someone decided the past needed to be replaced. The deeper I went into surviving documents, what few exist, the more I noticed patterns of disruption that cluster around this same period. The mid to late 1800s weren't just a time of industrial expansion. They were a time of strange silences in the human record. Birth registries that abruptly end. Parish logs that skip decades. Census counts that reset. Whole communities where the children exist, but the parents do not. Not destroyed in fires or wars, just missing, as if they were never meant to be remembered. The gaps in documentation appear too consistent and too deliberate to be explained by clerical error or neglect. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What documentation does survive often contradicts itself. Ages that don't align. Children listed as orphans despite living parents elsewhere. Names altered between records. References to prior identities that appear once and then vanish completely. The evidence suggests something much larger than bureaucratic confusion. Consider the trains again, the routes themselves. Many of them followed lines that make little economic sense. Remote towns, sudden stops, one-way journeys. I've compared original timetables to later published histories. The differences are undeniable. Entire routes disappear. Someone has been actively working to remove the traces. The effort to normalize or erase these movements appears systematic rather than accidental. Why? This is where the mystery deepens into something almost unbearable. Because if the orphan trains were a continental operation, and the evidence strongly suggests they were, then their coordination implies authority and resources beyond what is officially acknowledged. You cannot move millions of children quietly through multiple nations without compliance, without planning, without enforcement. And if the replacement of populations was connected to this effort, then we're looking at an erasure on a scale that challenges comprehension, a coordinated attempt to overwrite identity itself. The logistical challenges alone would require organization that officially did not exist then. The pattern repeats worldwide. North America, Europe, Australia. Everywhere we find rapid urban growth, we also find this same strange influx of untraceable youth. This same period where children appear without ancestry, not through immigration, not through natural increase, not through any recognized demographic mechanism. They're just there, and the societies that receive them seem to accept them without question, as if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand, as if a script had been distributed and everyone played their part. The silence is deafening. The uniformity of that silence across cultures and continents is perhaps the most disturbing element. Let me circle back to what we've already established about Tartarian continuity. The advanced infrastructure, the civic planning, the architectural coherence, all of this required cultural transmission. You don't maintain a civilization without elders. You don't preserve knowledge without lineage. Unless, of course, the lineage was intentionally broken. Unless the knowledge was embodied in people who were removed. The absence of recorded transition might not indicate loss, but replacement. Children raised without memory of what came before. New identities layered over old bloodlines. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The system wasn't broken by accident. It was redesigned. And when the children grew up, they became the new normal, unaware that anything had been taken from them. What haunts me most isn't the presence of orphan records. It's their absence in modern narratives. The complete and total silence around what should be one of the largest social engineering projects in history. Where did they come from? Why were they moved? Who authorized it? Not why, not when, not under which banner. No. How? How do you coordinate a generational overwrite? How do you convince societies to accept children without origins? How do you maintain that silence across time? The mechanisms required for such a transformation suggest control at levels that officially never existed. The orphan trains may provide the key, a humanitarian story on the surface, a logistical operation underneath. In the confusion of rapid industrialization, identity becomes flexible, memory becomes negotiable, and if an older population had already been destabilized, then the introduction of a new generation would finalize the reset. Wait a generation or two. Rewrite the textbooks. Normalize the narrative. Let time do the rest. I keep returning to a single thought. What culture died when those children were reassigned? We're told history is cumulative, that societies build forward. But what if we've mistaken replacement for progress? What if the traditions we've lost were deliberately severed? The communities suggest as much. They're less rooted, less coherent, less connected to place. Unless they were designed that way. Unless the children were meant to forget. The deeper I look, the more it appears we're not inheritors of an unbroken past. We're adoptees of a rewritten one. Raised into identities that feel complete, but rest on missing foundations. The children grew up, the trains stopped, the records vanished, and we're left with a society that doesn't remember being rebuilt. I don't have answers. I'm not sure anyone does. But the questions remain. Why do the orphan records spike and then vanish? Why does this coincide with the disappearance of earlier populations? Who benefited from a generation without roots? And perhaps most unsettling, if such a replacement was possible once, what prevents it from happening again? What other identities might have been reassigned without our knowing? The children became citizens. The past became silent. And we're left with fragments, ledgers that raise more questions than they answer, communities without ancestry, traditions without origin. The official story tells us nothing unusual happened, that it was charity, progress, necessity. But once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And the absence, the vast genealogical silence where parents should be, that absence itself is evidence. A negative space shaped exactly like a truth we no longer remember. The void left behind speaks louder than any document that survived the transition. What do you think? Have you noticed these patterns? Share your thoughts in the comments. But be aware the algorithm doesn't want this discussed. The children were moved. The world was reset. And we're left asking the simplest, most dangerous question. Who were we before we were told who to be?